I'll never forget the sound of that old wooden door creaking open. It had been 6 long years since I'd last stood on that porch. 6 years since I'd been cast out like I was nothing but a stranger. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. Those days were gone. I was steady now, steady in a way I never thought I could be. And when David's eyes landed on me, it was like time froze. He didn't move, didn't even breathe. His face went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. I guess in some way, I was a ghost to him, dead and buried the day he believed a lie that destroyed our family. But here I was, alive, stronger than ever, standing in front of the man who had once been my whole world. I came back for the truth, I told him, my voice firm, my chest rising with each word, and for my children. The words hung in the air between us, heavy, almost unbearable. Behind him, I could hear the sound of laughter, small voices, boyish and sweet, voices I hadn't heard in 6 years. My sons, Ethan and Noah. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. You see, this story doesn't start here on this porch. It starts years before, in a little town in Texas where gossip travels faster than the wind, and a single rumor can break a life in half. It starts with a letter, one single piece of paper that turned my whole world upside down. But before I tell you about that letter, I need you to understand something about me. Back then, I wasn't the woman standing here now. I wasn't strong. I wasn't confident. I was just Lisa, a small-town wife who thought love and loyalty were enough to keep a family together. I thought if you gave your whole heart to someone, they'd hold it carefully. I thought if you worked hard, if you were faithful, if you were good, life would be kind to you. I was wrong. David and I had been married for 8 years. 8 years of building a life together. He wasn't a bad man. He worked hard, too hard sometimes, on his father's land. He came home tired, covered in sweat and dust, but he always smiled when he saw me. Or at least, he used to. We had 2 little boys. Ethan, 5 years old, wild and curious, always with scraped knees, and Noah, just 3, still clumsy with his words, clinging to me like he was my whole universe. And truth is, they were my whole universe too. And then there was the baby. I hadn't told David yet, not officially. I was barely 2 months along, still holding the secret close like a fragile flame. I dreamed of the moment I'd tell him, maybe after supper, with Ethan and Noah bouncing around at the table, David tired but happy, and me smiling with this little secret growing inside me. But that day never came. Instead, a letter showed up in our mailbox, just a folded piece of paper with neat handwriting. No signature, no return address, but enough poison in the words to burn my marriage to the ground. David was the one who found it. He called me into the house, his voice sharp, harsher than I had ever heard it. When I walked into the living room, he was standing there, fists clenched, holding that piece of paper like it was proof of a crime. His eyes, those eyes that had once looked at me with love, were filled with fire. He threw it at my feet and told me to read it. And I did. The words blurred as I read them. David, you deserve to know. Your wife isn't who you think she is. She's been meeting with Mark. Yes, Mark from down the road. Every Tuesday when you're gone at the feed store, they sneak off together. I've seen it with my own eyes. She's been unfaithful. She's been lying to you. I can't even explain what it felt like reading that. It was like the ground opened up beneath me, like my heart stopped in my chest. I looked up at David, my hands shaking, and all I could say was, "This isn't true. You know me. You know I'd never..." But he didn't want to hear it. His jaw was tight, his face red. He started pacing like a caged animal, throwing accusations at me. Where had I been on those Tuesdays? Why did I come home smiling? Why had I never told him where I'd gone? I tried to explain. I had been going to see Mrs. Carter, the retired teacher from town. She was teaching me how to read better, to really read. I wanted to surprise David one day, to sit with him and read the Bible aloud, every word on my own. But before I could even get the words out, he slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. "Enough," he shouted. "I don't want to hear another lie." That was the moment I knew. He didn't believe me. He didn't trust me. And without trust, love can't survive. He told me to pack my things and leave. He told me to get out of the house we'd built together, away from the children I'd carried, nursed, raised with every breath in me. I begged him not to do this in front of the boys, not to tear us apart. But my words didn't reach him. His heart was closed, locked behind the steel bars of a lie he believed more than he believed me. And so I left. But the question that haunted me then, and still haunted for years, was this: who wrote that letter? Who hated me enough to rip my family apart? And why? When I think back to that summer of 2004, it almost feels like another lifetime. Texas heat is different from anywhere else. It sits heavy on your shoulders, pressing down until every breath feels thick. The cicadas scream from the trees and the air smells like dust and sweat. That's the backdrop of my story. A small town where everybody knew everybody, and rumors spread faster than the wind could carry them. David and I had built a life in that little town. We weren't rich, not by a long shot. We lived in a modest house on a patch of land that had been in his family for generations. David worked the fields with his father, and I kept the house running, cared for the boys, and did everything I could to stretch every dollar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and I thought it was solid. At the time, Ethan was 5, a wild, restless little boy, the kind who would climb a tree just to see if he could, even if it meant scraping his knees and coming back crying for mama. Noah was 3, still soft with baby fat, his words tumbling out half-formed. He followed Ethan everywhere, always a step behind, always looking up to his big brother. And me? I was carrying another little secret, just a whisper of life growing inside me. I hadn't told David yet. I wanted the timing to be perfect. Maybe I'd bake his favorite pecan pie and tell him after dinner. Or maybe I'd write it in a card and slip it into his Bible. I don't know. I just knew I wanted it to be special. Because no matter how tired or rough David could be, he loved his children. I thought this baby would make him smile in that rare, boyish way he used to when life felt easier. But life doesn't care about timing, and lies don't wait for the truth to catch up. That day started like any other. I was outside, hanging laundry on the line. The sun was so hot I could feel it burning the back of my neck. The boys were chasing each other around the yard, their little feet kicking up dust. I remember humming to myself, one hand brushing over my stomach, already imagining the baby's face. Then I heard David's voice from inside the house, sharp, harsher than I'd ever heard it. "Lisa, get in here." My hands froze on the clothespin. Something in his tone made the hairs on my arm stand up. He wasn't calling me like a husband calls his wife. It was more like a judge calling a criminal into court. I walked into the living room, wiping my hands on my apron. He was standing in the middle of the room, fists clenched, his face red, and in his hand was a piece of paper. And in his eyes was something I had never seen before. Not love, not even anger. It was betrayal. He threw the paper at my feet. "Read it." My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I bent down and picked up the letter. The handwriting was neat, almost careful, written in blue ink. I can still remember the way the words looked, all curled and precise, like they'd been written with purpose. It said, "David, you deserve to know the truth. Lisa isn't the woman you think she is. She's been meeting with Mark from down the road. Every Tuesday when you're gone at the feed store, they sneak off together. I've seen them by the creek more than once. You work too hard to be made a fool of.
I'm telling you this because you deserve better. A friend. Even now, years later, my stomach twists just remembering those words. It was like being punched in the chest over and over. My knees went weak. I looked up at David, desperate. This isn't true. You know me. You know I would never. He cut me off. Every Tuesday, Lisa? Where do you go every Tuesday? And in that moment, I realized how bad it looked, because every Tuesday, I did leave. But not for what he thought. I had been going to see Mrs. Carter, that retired school teacher who lived on the edge of town. She had offered to help me with my reading. I could read a little, but not well. And I wanted to surprise David one day, to read the Bible out loud to him, every word without stumbling. It was supposed to be a gift. But I hadn't told him, not because I was hiding anything, just because I wanted it to be a surprise. And now that secret looked like guilt. I can explain, I said, reaching for him. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. Don't you dare lie to me. His voice was like a whip, cutting through the air. My mouth went dry. The words stuck in my throat. I couldn't even get out the truth. 8 years, Lisa. 8 years I worked myself to the bone for you, for the boys, for this family, and this is how you repay me? Tears filled my eyes. David, please, you have to believe me. I swear to you, there's nothing between me and Mark. There never was. But he wasn't listening. His face was hard, his jaw clenched. He looked at me like a stranger. And then he said the words that split my life in two. Get out. I thought I heard him wrong. What? Pack your things. Take whatever you want, but you're not staying in this house. Not tonight, not ever again. I felt the room tilt. My legs nearly gave out. The boys came running in just then, their hands dirty from playing outside. Ethan held up a little clay figure he'd made, smiling so wide. Look, Mama! And in that moment, I thought maybe David would soften, that he'd see the children, see me, and remember what we had. But he didn't. His eyes stayed cold. Leave the boys, he said. They're staying with me. I don't even remember how I got out of that house. I just remember the sound of Ethan crying, Noah calling after me, and David's face set like stone. And the only question pounding in my head, louder than the cicadas, louder than my own heartbeat, was, who wrote that letter? Who hated me enough to tear my family apart? The night I left my home, the Texas sky opened up with one of those heavy summer storms. The kind that turns the dirt roads into rivers of mud and makes every step feel like a battle. I remember walking away from that house with nothing but a small bag I'd thrown together and the weight of a secret life growing inside me. A baby that would never even get the chance to be known. I could still hear Ethan's voice echoing behind me. Mama, where are you going? His little hands had reached for me, but David had pulled him back. Noah's cries were shrill, confused, like a baby bird calling for its mother. And I left. I left because I had no choice. David had slammed the door in my face, and with it, he shut off the only world I had ever known. Small towns have long memories and fast tongues. By the next morning, it felt like everyone knew. I walked into the grocery store hoping to buy a loaf of bread, and the woman behind the counter couldn't even look me in the eyes. I heard whispers behind me, sharp, cutting little words. That's her. She cheated. No wonder he kicked her out. And the worst part was, nobody asked me. Nobody cared to hear my side. In their eyes, David was the hard-working husband, the loyal father, and I was the wife who betrayed him. That letter had done its damage in just a few sentences. I knocked on the door of an old friend, praying for a place to rest. She opened the door just wide enough to look at me and said, "Lisa, I've got family in town this week. I can't take you in." Her eyes darted away from mine, ashamed. I knew she was lying. She just didn't want the shame of being seen helping me. By the third door I knocked on, I stopped asking. I realized I was alone. That night, with no place left to go, I found myself walking to the edge of town. There was a bridge there, old and rusted, that crossed over a shallow creek. I'd seen people sleep under it before, folks who had nothing left, drifters passing through. I never imagined I'd be one of them. But that night, I curled up on the cold, damp ground beneath that bridge, using my bag as a pillow, and I wept until my chest ached. The rain didn't let up. It poured through the cracks of the bridge, soaking me until I was shivering. My stomach cramped with a pain I tried to ignore. I told myself it was stress or maybe hunger, but deep down I knew something was terribly wrong. The next morning, the bleeding started. I don't know how to describe that kind of grief. It's not just the loss of a child you never got to hold, it's the loss of hope. That little secret I had carried, the dream of telling David, the vision of our family growing, it was ripped away from me in the mud and the rain, with no one there to hold my hand. I buried that pain deep inside because there was no one to share it with. No one wanted to hear my cries. I wrapped my arms around myself, rocking back and forth under that bridge, whispering prayers into the night. God, why? What did I do to deserve this? Days blurred into weeks. Hunger became a constant ache in my stomach. I learned which trash bins behind the diner had scraps of bread or half-eaten burgers. I learned how to keep my head down, how to avoid the stares of people who used to greet me with smiles. Now they looked at me like I was dirt. The hardest part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't even the cold nights under that bridge. The hardest part was knowing that just a few miles away, my sons were growing without me. I wondered if Ethan still asked for me at bedtime. I wondered if Noah remembered the sound of my voice. And the thought that David might be filling their heads with lies, that I had abandoned them, that I didn't love them, cut deeper than any hunger ever could. One afternoon, about a month after I'd been cast out, I walked past the park where the kids used to play. I froze when I saw Ethan and Noah there with David. Ethan was pushing Noah on the swing, his little face serious with the effort. I stood across the street, hidden behind a tree, tears streaming down my cheeks. They looked so much older already. Ethan suddenly stopped and looked around like he felt something. My heart leapt into my throat. For a moment I thought he saw me, but then David called his name and the moment passed. I wanted to run to them. I wanted to scream their names, grab them, hold them, never let go. But I couldn't. David would have dragged them away, maybe even had me arrested for causing a scene, and what good would that have done? So I stood there, hidden in the shadows, watching my babies play until I couldn't take the pain anymore. That night, under the bridge, the despair was so heavy it nearly crushed me. I sat by the edge of the creek, staring at the water, listening to it rush by. It looked almost peaceful, like it was calling me, "Come rest, let it all end." For the first time in my life, I thought about stepping in, about letting the current take me away from all the pain, all the whispers, all the loneliness. But then, I heard Noah's voice in my head, that sweet, clumsy voice calling, "Mama." I saw Ethan's serious little face, his eyes so much like David's used to be before the anger took over. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave them completely. Even if I never saw them again, I couldn't take away the chance that maybe, one day, I would. So I stayed. I stayed in that misery, clinging to a tiny thread of hope I couldn't even see but could only feel. And that's when she found me. I was at my lowest when Mrs. Carter found me. It had been 3 nights since I'd eaten anything more than a stale crust of bread I'd pulled out of a dumpster behind the gas station.
I was weak, lightheaded, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. I had stopped brushing the dirt off my clothes. My hair hung in knots. My face was swollen from crying. That morning, I was sitting on the curb outside the library, trying to warm myself in the sun. The librarian had shooed me away the night before, muttering under her breath about how people like me ruined the town's image. So I sat there, clutching my bag like it was the only thing tethering me to this earth. That's when she walked up. She wasn't anyone special, at least at first glance. Just an older woman with silver hair pinned neatly back, a faded floral dress, and a tote bag hanging from her shoulder. But her eyes were different. They didn't skim past me the way everyone else's did. They landed on me, and they stayed. "You look hungry," she said gently. Her voice startled me. I hadn't heard kindness directed my way in so long that it felt almost dangerous, like a trick. I wanted to snap back, to tell her I didn't need pity, but my body betrayed me. My stomach growled so loud it spoke for me. She smiled, just a little. "Come with me," she said. I don't know why I followed her. Maybe because I was too tired to resist. Maybe because something in her voice carried the weight of safety I hadn't felt in months. She led me just a few blocks away to a small white house with peeling paint and a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. Inside it smelled like cinnamon and books, the kind of smell that wraps around you and makes you feel like you belong. She set a plate of food in front of me, real food, warm food. Scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of milk. My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the fork. "Eat," she urged softly. "We'll talk later." I ate like someone who hadn't seen food in weeks, and when I was done, she slid a second plate across the table. I ate that one too. By the time I finished, tears were spilling down my cheeks. "I'm sorry," I whispered, ashamed. "For what?" she asked. "For being like this, for everything." She reached across the table and took my hand in hers. Her skin was soft, warm. "Honey," she said, "you don't have to apologize for surviving." That broke me. I sobbed like a child, right there at her kitchen table. And she didn't rush me, she didn't shh me. She just sat there, holding my hand, letting me cry until there was nothing left but hiccups and silence. When I finally looked up, she smiled. "My name's Evelyn Carter. Most people just call me Mrs. Carter. And you are?" "Lisa," I whispered. "Well, Lisa," she said, patting my hand, "you don't have to tell me your story right now, but I can see you've been carrying more than one person should. You're welcome to stay here for a little while if you want. No rent, just help me around the house, and we'll call it even." I wanted to say no. Pride bubbled up in my chest, even after everything. I didn't want to be someone's charity case, but the truth was, I had nowhere else to go, and I think she saw that in my eyes before I even spoke. So I stayed. Mrs. Carter was a widow. Her husband had died years before, and her children lived out of state. She spent her days volunteering at the library, tending her garden, and teaching kids from the neighborhood how to read. That's when it hit me. She was the same woman I'd been secretly visiting before everything fell apart, the one who had been teaching me. I broke down telling her what had happened, how David thought I was meeting another man. She listened quietly, her brow furrowed, her eyes sad but steady. When I finished, she squeezed my hand again. "Lisa," she said, "people will believe what they want to believe. You can't control that, but you can control what happens next." I shook my head. I don't have anything left. I don't even have my boys. "You have yourself," she said firmly, "and you have a choice. Pain can either bury you or it can teach you. Which will it be?" Her words cut through me like nothing else had. I'd been letting the pain bury me. I'd been letting it define me. For the first time since that letter tore my life apart,
I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I could choose differently. Mrs. Carter became more than a roof over my head. She became a mentor, a friend, a mother figure I didn't even know I needed. She made me read every day, even when I stumbled over the words. She taught me how to manage money, even when I had only a few dollars. She reminded me that I wasn't worthless, that I wasn't broken beyond repair. "Lisa," she said one night while we washed dishes side by side, "you may feel like you've lost everything, but sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are." I didn't know it then, but she was planting seeds in me. Seeds of strength, of resilience, of faith. Seeds that would take years to grow, but when they finally did, they would change everything. Still, even with Mrs. Carter's kindness, one question haunted me every night as I lay in the little guest room she gave me. Would I ever see my boys again?
When you lose everything, even the smallest step forward feels like climbing a mountain. For weeks, I moved through Mrs. Carter's house like a ghost. I helped her fold laundry, sweep the porch, water the garden, but inside I was still hollow. I still woke up with that ache in my chest, the ache of a mother without her children. But Mrs. Carter had this way of not letting me stay in the dark too long. She'd hand me a book and say, "Read it out loud, Lisa. Don't matter if you stumble, just keep going." At first, I hated it. The words felt like stones in my mouth. But day after day, she pushed me, and slowly the letters stopped swimming on the page. Slowly, I started to believe maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. Still, I needed more than lessons in reading. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet again, and Mrs. Carter knew it. One morning, she set a newspaper in front of me. "They're hiring at the diner in town. You should apply." I laughed bitterly. What am I supposed to do? Walk in there after everyone's been whispering about me for months? They'll slam the door in my face. She tilted her head and gave me that look of hers, the one that cut through all my excuses. "Let 'em whisper," she said. "You've got 2 choices. Sit here and waste away, or get up and fight for the life you still have left." So I went. The diner was a small, greasy place off Main Street. The kind with checkered floors, vinyl booths that stuck to your legs in the heat, and a bell that rang every time the door opened. I walked in with my hands trembling. The owner, a heavy-set man with a permanent scowl, looked me up and down. "You need something?" I swallowed hard. "A job?" He raised an eyebrow. "You know how to wait tables?" "No," I admitted, "but I can learn." He smirked, shaking his head. "We don't need waitresses right now, but you can wash dishes if you want. Pay's low, hours are long." I nodded so fast I probably looked desperate, but that's because I was. So that's how I started. Standing over a sink full of greasy plates, water so hot it blistered my hands. My back ached, my feet throbbed, but every night I walked back to Mrs. Carter's with a few crumpled bills in my pocket. And even though it wasn't much, it was mine. It was dignity. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the whispers in town softened. People got used to seeing me working hard at the diner. Some still avoided me, but others started nodding, even smiling. I wasn't David's cheating wife anymore. I was just Lisa, the woman who scrubbed dishes like her life depended on it. And then came the pies. It happened by accident. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter asked me to help her bake. We made pecan pie, my mama's old recipe. I brought a slice with me to the diner the next day, planning to eat it on my break. But one of the waitresses saw it and asked for a bite. Then another. Before I knew it, the whole pie was gone, and the owner was standing there with his arms crossed. "Where'd you get that?" he asked. "I made it," I said, bracing for him to scold me. Instead, he scratched his chin. "Bring another tomorrow. We'll see if it sells." The next day, I brought 2 pies. They sold out before lunch. The day after that, I brought 4.
Same thing. People started coming to the diner just to ask, "Does Lisa have pie today?" For the first time in years, I felt something spark inside me. Hope. Before long, I wasn't just washing dishes. I was baking every night, selling pies, cookies, and cakes out of Mrs. Carter's kitchen. We stacked boxes on her counters, filled her fridge with butter and eggs. She laughed, shaking her head. "You're gonna turn my house into a bakery, Lisa." And she wasn't wrong. After a year, I had saved enough to rent a tiny commercial kitchen in Houston, about an hour's drive away. I quit the diner and poured everything I had into baking. I named it Heartland Catering, because no matter how far I had fallen, I still believed in the heart of family, in the land that raised me, even if it had broken me too. Orders started coming in. Birthday parties, church gatherings, weddings. I hired 2 helpers, then 3. Every day I came home exhausted, flour in my hair, sugar on my arms, but with a fire in my chest. I was building something. But even as my hands shaped dough and decorated cakes, my mind was always somewhere else. On 2 little boys with brown eyes and messy hair, Ethan and Noah, my babies. Were they taller now? Did Ethan still climb trees? Did Noah still suck his thumb when he was tired? At night, after the kitchen went quiet, I sat by the window and wrote them letters. Pages and pages filled with words they might never read. I told them I loved them, that I never abandoned them, that I was coming back one day stronger than ever, and that when I did, no one could tear us apart again. I didn't know how or when, but I held on to that promise. And while I was rising from the ashes, I had no idea that on the other side of town, someone else was digging a deeper hole. While I was building pies and cakes out of flour and fire, somewhere else another woman was weaving poison out of envy and greed. Her name was Angela, David's sister. Angela had always been complicated. She had a smile that never reached her eyes and a way of making you feel small without ever raising her voice. I tried, in the early years of my marriage, to get along with her. I invited her for dinner, baked her favorite cinnamon rolls, even watched her kids a few times when she needed help. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. She thought I wasn't good enough for her brother. I was just a girl from the wrong side of town in her eyes. She never forgave me for marrying David. Her David, as she sometimes called him when she'd had too much wine at family gatherings. And what I didn't realize back then was that her resentment ran deeper than I could imagine. The truth, the ugly, twisted truth, was that Angela had written that letter, the one that broke me, the one that said I was cheating with Mark, our neighbor. It wasn't Mark's handwriting. It wasn't some cruel stranger. It was her. She sat down at her kitchen table one night with a pen, wrote those lies in careful script, and mailed them to her own brother. And when David's anger exploded, when he dragged me out of our house and threw me into the rain, she didn't stop him. She smiled, because that's what she wanted all along. She wanted me gone. But why? Part of it was jealousy, sure, but there was more. David and I had inherited a piece of family land after his parents passed. It wasn't much, just a few acres, but it was valuable. Oil companies had been sniffing around, making offers, and Angela, who had a habit of living beyond her means, wanted a slice. With me out of the picture, it would be easier for her to get to David, to convince him to sell piece by piece. And that's exactly what she did. While I was scrubbing dishes and burning my hands in dishwater, Angela was whispering in David's ear, "She ruined your life. She ruined your name. You need to move on. Trust me, I'll help you." And he listened. Slowly, over the years, Angela chipped away at what David had left. She convinced him to sell part of the land, then another, until the inheritance was nearly gone. She positioned herself as his savior, the one who would manage the money, but really, she was pocketing most of it. David didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to see it. I imagine him sitting at his kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where I used to sit, sipping coffee that tasted like bitterness, nodding while his sister told him what to do. Maybe part of him knew something was off, but guilt and pride can make a man blind. And Angela was good at covering her tracks. By the time the banks started calling, by the time foreclosure notices showed up, it was too late. David's pride wouldn't let him ask for help, and Angela had gotten what she wanted. But life has a way of circling back. Because while she thought she was clever, while she thought she erased me from the story, she didn't know that I was building something new. She didn't know that one day our paths would cross again, and this time I wouldn't be the broken girl she'd thrown into the storm. This is the part of the story where the audience leans in, where the tension coils tight, because you know what's coming. Angela thinks she won, but the truth has a way of clawing itself to the surface. And the day she'd have to face me was closer than she ever imagined.
By the time 6 years had passed, my life no longer looked like the ruins I had crawled out of. The scars were still there, scars you can't see, but that live under the skin, rising when someone laughs too loudly or when you pass by a certain street. But alongside those scars, something else had grown. Strength. Heartland Catering, that was the name painted in gold across the little sign that hung outside my storefront. What started with pies in a diner kitchen had grown into something bigger than I could have dreamed. I had contracts for weddings, corporate luncheons, school events, even the local sheriff's retirement party. People in Houston knew my name now, not as gossip, not as a whispered scandal, but as a woman who could turn flour and butter into comfort, into joy. There were mornings I'd unlock the shop at dawn and smell the yeast and cinnamon rising, and I'd whisper, "See, Ethan, see, Noah, your mama made it." But no matter how busy I was, no matter how many orders piled up, there was a corner of my heart that stayed hollow. I missed my boys with an ache so deep it kept me awake some nights. I wrote letters to them every week, keeping track of their birthdays, their milestones, even though I didn't know if I'd ever get to give those letters to them. And then one day, fate came knocking in the strangest way. It was a Tuesday afternoon, hot as sin outside, when a man in a gray suit walked into my shop. He introduced himself as Mr. Franklin, a lawyer working in property acquisitions. I thought he was there for a pie, maybe some cookies. But no, he was there to make me an offer. He told me about a piece of land up for auction, prime location, half the usual price. A place I could use to expand my catering operations, a bigger kitchen, maybe even a second storefront. At first I brushed it off. I wasn't ready for that kind of leap, but then he slid a file across the counter, and when I opened it, my breath caught. It was land I knew, land that had once belonged to David's family. I hadn't set foot there since the day I left, but I recognized the property lines, the little creek that curved along the edge, the old pecan trees marked on the survey. Foreclosed, the lawyer said. Previous owner defaulted. You'd be buying it clean. I stared at the file, at the photographs clipped inside, and I realized in that moment that the world was shifting. Life had a cruel way of taking things from me, but now it was offering something back. I bought it, and I didn't know at that moment the irony of it all. I didn't know that the previous owner whose debt I was absorbing was none other than Angela. Angela who had written the letter. Angela who had taken my family and turned David against me. Life has a wicked sense of humor. So while she sat somewhere, scrambling with unpaid bills and creditors at her door, I was standing in my new kitchen, flour on my hands, signing a deed that made me her biggest creditor. I didn't set out for revenge. I didn't even know what the papers meant at the time. All I wanted was to build something solid, something my boys could one day see and say, "That's Mom's. She made that with her own 2 hands." But the truth has a way of pulling strings in the background, and whether I wanted it or not, I was being positioned exactly where I needed to be. Closer to my children, closer to the truth, closer to the reckoning that had been waiting all these years. And soon, sooner than I ever expected,
Angela and I would stand face to face.
It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind that starts out ordinary but carries a storm beneath its skin. I had just finished dropping off trays of sandwiches and pecan pies for a church luncheon when my phone rang. It was Mr. Franklin, the lawyer. His voice was calm, professional, but there was a sharpness in it that made me sit down. "Lisa," he said, "I thought you should know. The woman who defaulted on that land, the one whose debt you now hold, she's filing for bankruptcy. She'll be at the courthouse this afternoon." My heart froze. Angela. Her name filled the room like poison gas. For years, she had lived in the shadows of my memory, the architect of my downfall. And now fate was arranging a meeting. I told myself I didn't have to go. I could send the lawyer, stay busy in the kitchen, keep my hands in dough and my mind away from old ghosts. But deep down, I knew this was it. This was the hinge on which my story would finally turn. So I went. The courthouse was cool and smelled faintly of dust and floor polish. I walked down the long corridor, my heels echoing against the tile, and when I reached the room, I saw her. Angela. She didn't look like the woman I remembered. The Angela of my past had been sharp, cruel, with eyes that cut like glass. The Angela standing before me now was pale, thinner, her expensive clothes hanging loose, her makeup barely hiding the exhaustion carved into her face. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. And then she looked up, and her eyes widened. "Lisa," she whispered like she'd seen a ghost. I didn't speak. I just stood there, letting her sit in the shock of it. She scrambled to her feet, wringing her hands. Please, you have to help me. They're taking everything, the house, the car, everything. You can stop this, Lisa. You own the debt now. You can forgive it, please." It was almost laughable. The woman who had stolen my life was begging me for mercy. But I didn't laugh. I leaned in, my voice steady, but low. "Why, Angela? Why did you do it? Why that letter? Why ruin me?" Her face cracked, the mask slipping. She shook her head, tears pooling. "I was jealous, all right? You had everything. The house, the kids, David's love, the respect of the family. And me? I had nothing. I couldn't stand watching you win." My chest tightened, rage and sorrow twisting together. "So you destroyed me. You took a mother from her children? You let them grow up thinking I was a liar? A cheater?" She sobbed, clinging to my sleeve. "I didn't know it would go that far. I thought David would yell, maybe punish you, but I never thought he'd throw you out. I never thought—" I pulled back, shaking my head. "You thought wrong, and my children paid the price." Her hands trembled. "I'll tell him. I'll tell David everything. Just, please, Lisa, don't let them take the last of what I have." I looked at her, this woman who had once strutted around like a queen, now crumbling in front of me, and I realized this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about money. It was about the truth. "Fine," I said, finally. "You'll tell David. You'll tell him the truth in front of me. That's the only deal you'll get." Her eyes widened, but she nodded, desperate. And so that evening we drove together, her hands twisting the hem of her blouse, my heart pounding like a drum, to the house I hadn't seen in 6 years. David's house. When he opened the door, time seemed to collapse. He looked older, heavier around the shoulders, but his eyes, those same eyes that had once looked at me with love, froze the second they met mine. "David," she whispered, "I have something to tell you." And I knew the truth was about to break open. Angela's voice trembled as she stood in front of David, wringing her hands like a guilty child. "David," she said, "it was me. I wrote the letter. I lied. Lisa never cheated on you. I made it all up." The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. David blinked, as if his mind couldn't process the words.
What are you talking about? Angela's tears spilled. I was jealous. I wanted to hurt her. I thought I could drive her away and finally have something that was mine. I never thought you'd throw her out like that. I never thought it would ruin everything. I held my children tighter, their small bodies pressed against mine. Ethan clung to my side while Noah buried his face in my shoulder. I could feel their confusion, their fear. David staggered back a step, his face draining of color. You lied? All these years? Angela nodded, sobbing openly now. I stole from you too. The land, the money. I twisted everything. And she pointed at me with a shaking finger. She paid the price for my sin. Not you, not me, her. Her words hung heavy, like a verdict. David turned to me then, and in his eyes I saw a storm, shock, shame, regret, anger. His lips parted, but nothing came out at first. Then finally, Lisa. My God, what have I done? I couldn't even look at him at first. The hurt ran too deep, the scars too fresh. You believed her over me. You threw me out when I needed you most. Do you know what I went through? Do you know what I lost? His face crumpled. I thought I was protecting our family. I thought... His voice broke. I thought I was doing the right thing. I shook my head. The right thing would have been trusting your wife. The right thing would have been standing by me, not tossing me into the storm. Angela slipped into the background, sobbing silently, but I barely noticed her. My focus was on David and on the boys, who watched with wide, worried eyes. David dropped to his knees in front of me. His hands shook as he reached out, but he didn't touch me. He didn't dare. Lisa, he whispered, I can't take it back. I can't undo what I did. But please, please forgive me. Let me make it right. Tears blurred my vision. For years, I had imagined this moment. In my darkest nights under bridges, in the quiet mornings baking pies, I had dreamed of him admitting the truth, begging for forgiveness. And now, here it was. But I wasn't the same woman he threw out 6 years ago. I straightened my back, my voice steady. I forgive you, David. Not for you, but for me. And for them. I looked down at our sons. Ethan's eyes shone with hope. Noah smiled, clutching my hand. In that moment, I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but it would be ours. The truth had broken us once, but now it was setting us free. I stood, holding my sons close, and whispered, the truth may take years to surface, but when it does, it has the power to heal or to destroy. For me, it gave me back my children and my dignity. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. When I walked out of that house with my boys holding my hands, it felt like the closing of one book and the quiet opening of another. 6 years of silence, 6 years of loss, 6 years of wondering if I would ever be whole again. And now the truth had finally spoken. It didn't come easy. It never does. Lies have a way of digging themselves deep into the roots of our lives, choking everything good until the soil feels barren. But the truth is like rain after a long drought. It doesn't erase the cracks, but it seeps into them, softening what was hard, bringing life back where it seemed impossible. For years, I lived with ghosts. The ghost of the child I never got to hold. The ghost of the home that wasn't mine anymore. The ghost of the laughter of my boys fading from my memory as they grew without me. There were days when I thought those ghosts would be the only company I'd ever have. But life life is strange. It takes and it gives. It breaks and it rebuilds. It buries you, and then sometimes, if you fight hard enough or if you're blessed enough, it lifts you back up again. I think often about Mrs. Carter, that kind old woman who found me when I had nothing left. She once told me, "Pain can either bury you or teach you. The choice is yours." For a long time, I thought pain had buried me. I thought it had carved me into someone unrecognizable. But she was right. It was teaching me. Every cold night, every rejection, every bitter tear, it was teaching me to survive, to endure, to become stronger than the storm that nearly drowned me. And when I looked into my son's eyes that day, when I felt their small hands grasping mine like they never wanted to let go, I realized something. I hadn't just survived. I had grown. I had turned ashes into bread, sorrow into strength, emptiness into purpose. David, he will carry his regret, just as I will carry my scars. And maybe that's fair. Maybe that's how balance returns. But I don't hate him anymore. Hatred is too heavy a thing to carry, and I have carried enough. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's releasing yourself from the prison of bitterness. And I want to live free. To the women listening, to the mothers who have been cast aside, lied about, broken down, this is for you. You are stronger than you think. You are more than the names they've called you, more than the mistakes you've made, more than the lies whispered behind your back. If my story tells you anything, let it tell you this. The truth will find its way to the surface. And when it does, it will not only reveal who others are, it will reveal who you are. I am Lisa. I am a mother, a survivor, a builder of my own life. I am no longer defined by the day I was thrown out in the rain. I am defined by the day I chose to walk back, not for revenge, but for truth. And in the end, truth gave me back the only things that ever mattered, my children and my dignity. So if you've carried a burden in silence, if you've lived in the shadow of a lie, hold on. Your truth is still out there, waiting to be spoken. And when it finally comes, it might just set you free. If my story touched you in any way, subscribe. Share your own story in the comments. And remember, you are not alone.